So this week we're going to talk about some evidences for the Book of Mormon. We've been studying the Book of Mormon this year, so I thought this would be something fun that we could look into. I know I've talked a little bit about this in our Elders Quorum's meetings, but I haven't really gone into any detail. So this is something I find really interesting, and I hope you do too. So I thought I'd start out with this. This is Hugh Nibley, a famous church historian. When he was teaching a Book of Mormon class at BYU, he would give this challenge each semester to his students. So he says this: Since Joseph Smith was younger than most of you and not nearly so experienced or well educated as any of you at the time he copyrighted the Book of Mormon, it should not be too much to ask you to hand in by the end of the semester, which would give you more time than he had, a paper of, say, 500 to 600 pages in length. Call it a sacred book, if you will, and give it the form of a history. Tell of a community of wandering Jews in ancient times. Have all sorts of characters in your story and involve them in all sorts of public and private vicissitudes. Give them names, hundreds of them, pretending that they are real Hebrew and Egyptian names of circa 600 BC. Be lavish with cultural and technical details, manners and customs, arts and industries, political and religious institutions, rites and traditions. Include long and complicated military and economic histories. Have your narrative cover 1,000 years without any large gaps. Keep a number of interrelated local histories going at once. Feel free to introduce religious controversy and philosophical discussion, but always in a plausible setting. Observe the appropriate literary conventions and explain the derivation and transmission of your varied historical materials. Above all, do not ever contradict yourself. For now we come to the really hard part of this little assignment. You and I know that you are making this all up. We have our little joke, but just the same you are going to be required to have your paper published when you finished it, not as fiction or romance, but as a true history. After you have handed it in, you may make no changes in it. What is more, you are to invite any and all scholars to read and criticize your work freely, explaining to them that it is a sacred book on par with the Bible. So, he says, to date, no student has carried out this assignment, which of course was not meant seriously, but why not? If anyone could write the Book of Mormon, as we have been so often assured, it is high time that some devoted and learned minister of the gospel, let us say, performed the invaluable public service of showing the world that it can be done. So it would be truly impossible for a uneducated farm boy from upstate New York to be able to write such a work as he describes. And I think that was a really cool way of showing the complexity of the Book of Mormon. Um, so further evidences of why Joseph Smith couldn't possibly have written it himself, as so many like to say that he has done, was some different studies that used word print and stylometry to try and see who the author was of the Book of Mormon. One study was the Hilton Study of 1990. It was conducted by John Hilton and some researchers from Berkeley University, most of which who were not LDS, and they studied word pattern ratios in the Book of Mormon and compared them between texts attributed to Nephi and Alma and those from Joseph, Oliver, and Solomon Spalding, who was author in the same time of Joseph Smith, or before Joseph Smith, that people think that Joseph Smith used to write the Book of Mormon. He'd plagiarized a lot of that. So they used a bunch of different controls, 26 texts, 9 different control authors, 325 pairwise comparisons to compare all their different things. So they used writings that they knew were from Joseph Smith, from Oliver Collier, Solomon Spalding, and then those from the Book of Mormon, and compared them all to see if their literary styles were similar and different things. So what did they find out? They said, it is statistically indefensible to propose Joseph Smith or Oliver Cowdery or Solomon Spalding as the author of the 30,000 words from the Book of Mormon attributed to Nephi and Alma, and also that Nephi and Alma have word prints unique to themselves and measure statistically independent from each other in the same fashion that other uncontested authors do. These results indicate that the Book of Mormon was indeed multi-authored, with authorship consistent to its own internal claims. So if you look at it, there's roughly a 1 in 15 trillion chance of Nephi and Alma having been the same author. So pretty compelling evidence that was not written by one person, and it was written by many people, and so it couldn't have been written just by Joseph Smith. Another study was the field study. So this was in 2011, and they used some sort of statistical analysis to look at the Book of Mormon. And they found that Sidney Rigdon and Solomon Spaulding were each assigned a value of 0% for the relative likelihood of authoring the Book of Mormon, and Joseph Smith was assigned a 3% value. In contrast, the chance of it having been written by one or more authors, not included in the set, so their statistical set they were using, they would only put certain people in there and give them a value of how likely they were to write it. So there was a 93% chance that it was written by one or more authors, and they weren't in that set. So very high likelihood that it wasn't Joseph Smith, and that, again, it was written by many different authors. So pretty interesting stuff. Emma Smith said this about Joseph. She said, Joseph could neither write nor dictate a coherent and well-worded letter, let alone dictate a book like the Book of Mormon. And though I was an active participant in the scenes that transpired and was present during the translation of the plates and had cognizance of things as they transpired, it is marvelous to me, a marvel and a wonder, as much as to anyone else. So we know the history from Joseph Smith's history too, that he would just pick up right where he left off. He would dictate everything, and so it would be truly a miracle if anyone could do that, and it was a miracle that he did do that through the power of God even. So pretty amazing stuff. And she also said, during no part of it did Joseph Smith have any manuscripts or book of any kind from which he read or dictate except the metallic plates which I knew he had. If she said he had anything of that kind, he could not have concealed it from me. So she's an eyewitness and has testimony that he did not plagiarize any books or anything from that point, which we see now from modern studies was impossible anyways. Another thing is interesting if we look in the scriptures for evidences of the Book of Mormon. Alma 37:23 says, and the Lord said, I will prepare unto my servant Gazalim a stone which shall shine forth in darkness unto light. And so how could Joseph Smith come up with this word Gazalim? And it says Gazalim is one who gazes, or cut stones of the Most High. So when you talk about seer stones, how would he have known that that word Gazalim is not a literal Hebrew translation to basically seer stone? Pretty cool. Also, there's tons of references in the Bible to the Urim and Thummim. So Exodus 28:30 says, and thou shalt put in the breastplate of judgment the Urim and the Thummim. And all these other scriptures here listed also give references to that. And then Joseph Smith says, I looked in, and there indeed did I behold the plates, and the Urim and Thummim, and the breastplate as stated by the messenger. The box in which they lay was formed by laying stones together in some kind of cement. In the bottom of the box were laid 2 stones crosswise of the box, and on the stones lay the plates and the other things with them. So we also know he has metal plates. So Reverend Martin Thomas Lamb in the late 19th century said, no such records were ever engraved upon golden plates or any other plates in the early ages. So at the time, it was laughable that he would even claim that there was ancient records on plates. That just was not done, so they thought. But we know from today, from our studies and archaeological findings, that there actually was a pretty common practice back in those time periods. So an example of this was a news story from Live Science that said the newly translated ancient Hebrew document may point to a tradition of preserving important texts by writing on metal. So here's just a few. There's tons of these different plates that have been found over the years of different, especially like religious documents being inscribed on metal plates. So very, very interesting stuff. And I love these evidences, not because it's something to base our testimonies on. By far the best way we can know of a surety of the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon is to follow its author's petitions to ask the Lord and receive a witness for yourself, as each of those people had done. So I want to do a couple more of these videos if you guys are interested in it. If this is all kind of common knowledge and you already know this, then I can go on to other things. But in the next videos, I was thinking about maybe making some about some of the geographical evidences we have of like Lehi's journey through the Arabian Peninsula. Also talking about some of the um, records we have from the ancient inhabitants of the Americas, like the descending god Quetzalcoatl, and some of those evidences we have from them of their histories of the events that transpired in the Americas, not found in the Book of Mormon, but in other ancient um, records. So if that stuff interests you, give me a text message or an email, and then I'll keep making some of these. If not, if you guys know this stuff already, I will go on to something else. But thank you very much, and I share these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.